Hello, everybody. It's Frank Norris from the Frank and Stan Chat, and welcome to our 29th edition. As you can see, it's just my good friend this morning, Stan Johnson. Good morning, Stan.
Good morning. Yeah.
Two
of us. This is a change for a while, isn't it?
It is actually.
Special guest.
I have to say, Stan, sadly, I think that most people prefer it when there are more than just you and me, because the viewing figures when we have a guest tend to rise. So, but I put it down to the fact we've probably got a hardcore of fans who just like listening to us wittering on.
So, we need to get out more.
Probably. Anyway, well, last week, I'm not going to go over the ground rules again, but we normally have this, last we had this session with Andy Hargreaves, which I think we both enjoyed immensely. And viewing figures are growing on that one, and it's been helpfully retweeted by Andy in the last few days to the noble, the good, and people way beyond our circle of friends. So we'll see what impact that has.
No reach.
Beyond our station.
Actually, Frank, you know it's National Kindness Day today.
Is it? Oh, Stan, it's your day.
Yeah.
I think we should we should have done something. I think we should, like Pudsey Bear, I think we should have some sort of like little love heart or something, you know. It could be a national campaign. It'd be one way we could get more people to watch the Frank and Stan Chat. But anyway, what's caught your eye this week, Stan?
Well, with everything that's gone on, it's very difficult sometimes to pick out one thing. But last night I got a text from my daughter-in-law showing me how the app, the world-beating super app that's going to tell us all when we've met with coronavirus, was working, because she got a text to say she'd been in contact or near somebody with coronavirus and she must isolate for 1 day. 1 day, followed very quickly by another text that said, "Your good news, your isolation will finish at 11:59 today." So it was actually an evening that she had to isolate for. So not sure why that is. Presume it's just another fault with the thing. But,
yeah.
You know, to get a text to say you've been at risk. Oh, by the way, you've been at risk for 9 days, but we're only telling you about it on the last day.
Well, on my HS app, it often, when I put it on in the morning, it sort of has this little red button in the corner, which alerts me to the fact that there is an alert, you know, on the phone. So I go on it, and then you for about 5 seconds you can see you've been in close contact, and then it disappears. You know, so then you're searching on your phone, you can't find it. And I think what it is that by the side of our house, we have a sort of passageway. It's not very few people use it, but you can imagine somebody who is infected, perhaps, or who's been close to somebody walking along the passageway, you know, so that it's within sort of about 10, 15 meters, you know, perhaps registers on my phone, and then a little bit later, people then, well, they weren't in contact for 15 minutes, so then it disappears off your phone. But the putting the phone on and then seeing that message, you think, oh no, you know, it's going to be 10 days of isolation. But it lasts for about 5 seconds that you think you're going to be isolated. What's caught my eye? Oh, Edenred. Edenred is the French company that were given the job of dishing out the free school meal vouchers, basically ensuring that at the beginning, well, into lockdown, those children entitled to free school meals could actually get a voucher and actually sort of be fed. And that Edenred scheme was a complete and utter shambles. You know, I think many school leaders will have spoken to me about how ineffective it was, and how they would try and register, and it would take yonks to register. And then the system itself didn't provide the vouchers at the right time. And just on an issue around the co-op, because the co-op shops around the country are not all the same co-op, I think most people might not be aware of that, but there are a number of cooperative societies. Because of that, the Edenred scheme couldn't handle this sort of different co-op system. So the co-op could not, even though they were desperate to do it, they couldn't be part of the Edenred scheme. But the reason I'm raising it today, and I know the National Audit Office are looking into all of this, and there's a report coming out, but lo and behold, they won the award for the most impressive company for dealing with lockdown issues at an award ceremony this week.
Well, perhaps, Frank, they might be the most impressive company dealing with lockdown. If you look at the state of the others,
the bar has got so low.
The bar is so low.
So who are they up against? Track and trace. They're up against track and trace. Yeah, so they're up against track and trace.
They've only cost millions rather than billions.
So up against track and trace, PPE. That was another one. You know, I mean, these were the hot runners for
all those various companies that seem to have got great big bungs of money who were nothing to do.
I do find this. I mean, I've been wanting to tweet about it, but I've not been able to get the right words. How on earth can the government, through the EFA, and through the DfE generally, criticise procurement processes in schools and academies when they have broken they have broken all of the procurement rules? They will say because it was a disaster waiting to happen, we had to act quickly. But you know, it feels as though any of them, you know, they generally phone up and say to all their mates, look, we've got a bit of a problem over, why don't you come around, we'll have a chat about it. And then they say, well, we've got a bit of a problem, couldn't you get some? And that person goes, I reckon I could get some. I don't know much about PPE, but I reckon I could get some. I know somebody. So suddenly there's 156 million gone off there. And that wasn't that.
Especially if you give us a contract that says we can work to a price 25% higher than normal price.
Yeah.
So there's a nice little cut to start with.
I know. Cut. I really feel, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because people do say, I mean, we've said this many times, you know, that there's just, you know, it's unprecedented times, you know, and I think I said last week or the week before, you know, that the government deal with events. They can't pick and choose what comes their way. And you've got to be resilient and ready to deal with that. And that's life in general, isn't it? You know, and that's true of schools, you know.
But there is someone who deals with complaints. So if you want to complain about track and trace, you can complain. The guy, I can't remember his name, but his wife is Dido Harding. So if you want to complain, that's obviously the right person to complain to.
Yeah. I think it was interesting. I mean, I think that the point here is trying to bring it back to schools. Is I think you get yourself in a very difficult position when teachers or people who work in school, they can sometimes end up with sort of friendly relationships. I'm not suggesting anything beyond that. A friendly relationship with people further up the leadership structure, and that's a problem for them, and it's a problem for those leaders, you know. And I think here this is another example whereby, you know, cronyism and support for people is affected by a relationship. Now, obviously, senior leaders need to have a relationship, you know, a good relationship with their staff. It can't always be brilliant, you know, that's life. But actually, there's got to be that sort of sense of, well, there's a certain way in which we behave and a certain way in which we act. You know, when you get to a position whereby, you know, major contracts are going to mates, or appear to be going to mates, even if there is a procurement exercise, if they appear to be going to mates, then that actually is a very, very dangerous place to be governance-wise. And I think that's true of leaders, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think it's true in schools as well, because I've dealt with over the last 3 or 4 years, where particularly where heads have been praised, you know, outstanding school, everything's wonderful, get a level of arrogance that sort of, it doesn't matter what we do because we're outstanding. And I mean, just in the last 2 years, I've had to deal with some issues where just breaking all the rules in terms of financial regulations, simply because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And there are ways around it. And, you know, I'll tell my governors it's okay, and they'll pass it on. So I do think there's a mirror in that, obviously to a much smaller scale, but it's always a dangerous one. And when you do see, I don't have as much dealing with it as I used to, but when you see heads, you know, the headlines that a head's been sacked, it's usually for buying some furniture or something, because it's one thing that people do that are outside the rules, but they feel as though it's not a major issue.
Yes.
And so, you know, when, I mean, I going back years and years and years, there was a classic one where somebody embezzled the money that the staff had collected for a wedding present,
Right.
and bought it via the school's procurement. It was it shows how long ago it was, a heated trolley when those were fashionable. But the one that came was one of those big stainless steel ones that they use in the kitchens. And that's when people started to get suspicious.
I think it's interesting because I do. I think I've learned over the years, primarily because of work we did in Ofsted. I think it became much sharper there when we were developing school inspection frameworks about the importance of good governance. And I've always been struck by the 2008 financial crisis, where Lehman Brothers went down, a major financial institution, and considering why did that company go down, and it then made me look at the work of a woman called Professor Marianne Jennings in the States, who looked at major companies and what was wrong with their governance structure, and there was a deep ethical fault line that ran through those companies, and one of them was around the arrogance of a CEO, of the person in charge, thinking that the success of the business was actually down to them. And I think there is a sort of when people talk about my school, that really grates. I just don't like it when people say my school, and because it is.
I know on my training with heads, I used to say you are a steward of that school for a period of time, and what your aim should be is pass it on in better condition than it was when you got it, in a better position, both in terms of the building itself and what the school does in terms of pupil performance.
Yeah,
but you're only a steward. It's never your school.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that it's really important, I think, I think some things happen to me around, it's hard to say you think you're more humble now than you were years ago, but actually
like, it's hard to be modest, Frank, when you're so good.
No, but actually all I'm saying is that I think I was quite arrogant and I was really driven, and I didn't really, I felt as though the pursuit of excellence for the children didn't really matter if that was at the expense of the staff. I saw it as collateral damage sort of thing, rather than, as somebody said, oh, I'm really sorry, somebody said to me after a few years, this is the stuff you've got, Frank, you've got to make them better, and I think that there was something at that point that made me think about the way that I was leading, and I think that's been with me ever since, but it certainly wasn't there at the beginning. So over time, I think through experience and people telling you straight, I think I've learned to be I'm not saying I'm any better, but I think I value and work at a solution in a slightly different way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if when it hit me home was when I moved from being an advisor, which, well, I remained to be an advisor, but I ran them, the teacher advisors who were subject specialists. And I considered that had a school 6 months earlier asked me to do inset on PE, I would have said, yeah, of course I'll do that. And I would have put something together. And then I met working with somebody who's actually a PE expert. And I listened to the things he's talking about. and it's miles away from where I would have been. And that certainly brought me down a number of stops from where I'd been, thinking, oh yeah, I can put something together for anything and everything. These were real subject experts who taught me a lot about what they knew that I didn't.
Well, I think, I mean, again, I remember when I got became the CEO in the co-op. I won't tell you the academy, but I was asked to go to the academy and just have a little walk round. And I was asked to stay in some lessons just to get a feel. And I ended up in a Spanish lesson, a year 10 Spanish lesson. And the teacher, I was just sitting there chatting to the children, trying not to be disruptive. But the teacher then said to me, it'd be really helpful because I don't have that many people come and visit. Could you help me in terms of, how I might improve that lesson? And I couldn't offer anything other than, relationships with the students. That was all. Technically, I could bring nothing to it. I can't speak a word of Spanish. So I think that there is this sort of business here, isn't there, around, really, you can probably judge a very poor lesson because of the response of the students, but that lesson was certainly not from what I could see, that the students were really on it. They were really wanting to learn, and they were very keen. But apart from that, I couldn't contribute anything to the way that she was managing, leading the technical aspects of teaching Spanish. I just couldn't bring anything to it. But we often rely on people, try and hoodwink people into thinking that actually, because I've got this job, I should know, and people must be, sort of blagging it at a very, very high level, and really trying to, and we're doing disservice really to the people that we're actually trying to support.
Yeah, I go back to that idea. Obviously, someone said it to you. I think I developed it when I got fed up of people saying, we've got so many unsatisfactory teachers that I've got to get rid of, and saying, well, that they're not going to disappear. So, if they're not satisfactory, you need to make them satisfactory and better and good and outstanding, because I truly believe that nobody came into the job wanting to have a miserable time, and I think particularly teachers who are in the older age bracket at some point was probably stunningly good teachers.
Yeah.
And we have to find that motivation again, and that's the job of a good leader.
Andy Hodgkinson, who is going to be one of our guests in a few weeks' time, tweeted this morning that the DFE issued their annual report, and he pointed to page 9. So I went to it, and actually I think it's worthwhile people looking at it, because there are a set of principles there which I think all of us would buy into. I think it does highlight how weak, I think, in a couple of them the DFE have been. But take that aside, one of them is around a statement, and it's unfortunate the way it's worded, I think, because it makes it sound as if the teachers are the problem, but actually the quality of teaching is not strong enough. That they're, and it's as if the way that's written is as if to say, the tone of it is one of, well, we need better teachers, as opposed to we need to work harder at improving the quality of the teachers we currently have.
Oh, and I go back to when we were both inspecting, and it was declared there was it 10% of teachers were unsatisfactory,
that was
of which there was no evidence. Yeah, there was no evidence whatsoever. Yeah. All they had was 10% of lessons were, which, if you ask anybody, definitely ask me, 100 lessons, how many would be good? If I was hitting 90 good lessons out of 100, I'd be thrilled.
I know.
And that's what the data was. It was not that 10% of teachers were unsatisfactory. It was that 10% of lessons were unsatisfactory.
Yeah. In fact, I think it was 15. I think it was on Newsnight. Yeah, I think Woodhead said 15. And I think after that, and that was based on, as you say, the percentage of unsatisfactory lessons. So, I think that
got multiplied up then, didn't it, into the number of teachers nationally?
Yes, it did. So I think that, but I do think though that, I think there was something that I mean, when I look at the quality of teaching now and the quality of relationships in the vast majority of schools, it feels to me infinitely stronger than it was, in the early 90s, for example, before pre-Ofsted.
I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, my view of Ofsted is not dissimilar to yours. I think it was the right thing to do at the right time, and I think it did make a significant difference. But now it's kind of still using the same stick that we used 20 years ago, and it's no longer effective.
Yeah,
it needs to be something different.
I think that, I mean, if you've got a situation where the vast majority of schools are judged to be good, and it's not on the current schools that are being reviewed, because a lot of these are schools that haven't been inspected for years. But actually, the annual report was saying it's 86% of schools are good. Now, compared to the high 50s when I joined Ofsted in 2001, I think that gives that really Ofsted should be working much more openly with the sector, with the profession, to find an accountability mechanism that the profession finds acceptable. Because the vast majority of schools are good now. So in effect, it's not as if they need to be leading, the Ofsted need to be leading that process. There needs to be a throw out there to say, well, come on, let's have all these options on the table. Let's have a discussion with the profession as to how we do it. A consensus needs to be gathered, or needs to be arrived at.
My view is I'd like to see the measure being how well the school knows itself. So the Ofsted go in, have a look and say, yeah, overall this school is good. Is that what the school is saying on its self-evaluation? Then this is a good school because it evaluates itself accurately. And the same with exam results. How much better would teacher appraisal be if they would, teacher assessment would be if they were judged not on how well the students did, but how accurate the assessments were.
Yeah.
So the pressure would be on making them accurate rather than making them good.
Yeah. I think it's probably, there needs to be this sort of lever that says, the high aspiration, we want the highest standards. And if you feel as though that is it, then actually I do think that there's a place for other local schools to be involved in that self-evaluation or the confirmation of your work. Yeah. So, and I think that moderation. Yeah, I think that the COVID stuff has brought local schools together. I think that schools, it's probably made it much more raw, in that you can't simply rely on the fact that you've got some good kids coming in, because actually they could get COVID just as much as some of the other kids could. So I do think that it's allowed something to happen between schools, and this is now the moment, I think, to say to schools, well, you convince your neighbours that your standards are that high, and let the neighbours learn from you as to how you got those standards so high. Let's open it up. Let's not close it down.
Yeah, well, I think just bringing it back to Andy Hargreaves, I think 20 years ago, he was saying that high stakes testing and high stakes inspection only leads to people finding ways around the system and basically cheating. And that's effectively what has happened. I won't say everybody's cheated. I do remember in one local authority where one school got remarkably high scores very early on in SATs, and the head teacher standing up and said, look, I don't mind that if some people appear to cheat, just as long as we could all be told and we could all cheat the same way.
I can't believe it. Well, if we've hit that point, then actually, well, I think we've done there about 25 minutes then. One thing we didn't get onto fully is Andy's piece, but perhaps we can pick that up. I think we've got another one of these where it's just you and me in the next couple of weeks, so we can perhaps pick it up then.
Well, shall we widen it and say we'll definitely look at ways that we might attack social mobility and use the stuff in Andy's book to give us a steer. Yeah,
it's interesting. The DFE principles are, I think 2 or 3 of them are around about a levelling up agenda and about enabling, some of the poorer members of society to sustain their improvement sort of thing. So I think that we can perhaps link it in with the DFE's ambitions, ambition, as well as Andy's themes and books.
The other thing, Frank, is the MPQ stuff. Have you seen the latest ones?
No.
Because there's no middle leader now. But there is one for culture, and there's one for executive head level, which is all based around trust, and one at head teacher level. But what's interesting is in the culture one, people's welfare, well-being is mentioned twice, once in the title and once relating to pupil.
Right.
There's nothing about developing a successful culture in a school that involves well-being of staff.
Right. Well,
management returns, which is for me is a positive.
Yeah. Because I've been a big fan of a really much more open sort of view being gathered about what staff views, parent views, student pupil views are. So I think that there's a lot more work we need to do in order to flush out within a school culture, what the views are, because actually just gathering, as if you can walk around, you can get a feel for an ethos. What you can't do is actually unpick some of the issues that might be under, deep down, which need to be unpicked. And I think the evidence that senior leaders get without a really open approach to this, where schools can actually can not publicize it, but actually, what happens if everybody thinks the school's great and the culture's great, but actually you do a staff survey, which you should be doing, and actually you've got some real problems in there. There's a temptation for senior leaders to close ranks then, because we don't want that to get out, because that's going to look really bad. But actually the staff probably want that to come out, so I think, for me, staff surveys and the culture and the way they're undertaken is really important to me. Anyway, I think we've come to the end, Stan.
So there's some subjects for future one.
I know. Actually, I think we have criticised the government a little bit this week, but the vaccine, news on the vaccine has lifted spirits, I think, a little bit, and I hope that can be delivered. Please tell me this is not going to be another disaster like Track and Trace and Edenred. Please tell me.
Well,
please.
Well, we've given it to a friend to organise.
I mean,
why not?
I know. Okay, well, thank you all for watching and for listening. Oh, and one thing, we have got this now on a podcast. So what I'll be doing is I'll be tweeting the link to the podcast as well. So these are not developed as a podcast, but if you are going for a run and you want to listen to us, you can put it on your phone or whatever, and you can listen to us wittering on as you plough your way around the
miles will pass by.
Very slowly. Okay, well, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all next week.
Cheers.